Hey everyone, in today's video, I want to break down what is really happening when we get those cravings. You know the ones, as it gets closer to 5 p.m. and you just have to have that drink or whatever your particular crutch is. I will also explain why, once we start, we need to keep having more. This is critical knowledge that will help you to not only quit, but also to avoid or at least minimize the risk of relapse. So let's begin with a typical scenario of let's say a successful business person or a busy parent who would be considered by society as a high functioning alcoholic. I hate labels such as alcoholic, but just so as you understand what I mean. This would be just as relevant for a functional abuser of cocaine or ice. So to tell themselves a story, so many of us tell ourselves, such as, I don't have a problem with my drinking, my drug use. I'm not like those alcos, those junkies. I can't be, as I can hold down a good job. I'm successful. Got a nice home, in a relationship, got a family. I got it all and I'm fully in control. And we believe the stories we tell ourselves. Our partners want to believe the story too, as it keeps the family together. There's good money coming in. There's this false sense of security. So we live this lie, telling ourselves we couldn't possibly have a problem with alcohol, or insert your substance of choice here, that we are not dependent on it, that we are in control. Yet, every day, as we get closer to drink o'clock, wine o'clock, whatever it is, for many of us, it's after work, or it may be after we have put the kids to bed. So as that time of the day gets closer, we begin to get cravings. We begin to plan our first drink or plan our diversion on the way home. So it's to stop by the pub or bottle shop or our dealer. Now, despite saying we were going to abstain today and meaning it at the time, here we are. So what happens? First up, as you know, that little voice in our head starts with the excuses. I've had a hard day at work. The kids are exhausting me. I deserve some downtime. Or I'm bored with this lockdown. There's nothing else to do. For some of us who are a little more aware and truthful with ourselves, we admit that it is a coping mechanism to deal with the emptiness in our lives, despite the appearances of having it all. Thing is, it's not the hard day or any other of the excuses we feed ourselves. It's not the lack of willpower. It's not due to so-called powerlessness in the face of a disease, as they would have us believe. Our bodies are actually very intelligent. And the truth is, all behavior, even those unhealthy ones resulting in addiction, are well intended. Yes, even that behavior where, even though we promised we will stop after a couple, we find that we can't. Confused yet? Let me explain what is actually going on in our bodies when we drink alcohol. As an example, same happens with other substances, well, similar. I can explain the differences on another post, but for today, let's stick with what happens when we drink alcohol. Okay, well, this is a simplified version of what is happening. As some of you who have watched my post, my previous post regarding autonomic nervous system, some of you may remember our body wants to maintain a state of equilibrium called homeostasis. In that autonomic nervous system polyvagal theory sort of world, this is what's called our safe zone. To do this, it utilizes two peptides in our brain, naturally created opioid peptides called endorphins and dynorphins. Endorphins are released each time we experience pleasure. This includes when we consume drugs or alcohol. dynorphins are pretty much the opposite. They are used to regulate many different things. As far as pleasure goes, it is the dynorphin is used to keep us from getting overly excited and to get us back to that safe zone of homeostasis. So consider them to be our body's own natural uppers and downers. Thing is, though, with pleasures that come from natural events, such as, for example, watching a comedy or spending time with loved ones, we can easily return to the baseline as the endorphins released are within the normal range. But when we drink alcohol or indeed use drugs, we are now putting a chemical in the body that our autonomic nervous system was never designed to regulate. And this matters because, unlike pleasures received naturally, these toxic substances generate a much larger spike of endorphins, which in turn throws us way off our body's baseline. To counter this, our body, or specifically the autonomic nervous system, in turn releases a massive amount of dynorphins in an attempt to restore homeostasis. Sorry about the morning coffee. What does all that mean to us, though, as we are trying to enjoy that well-deserved drink? Well, thanks to the pleasure felt, our brain releases endorphins. So we feel good after, we feel it after about 20 minutes or so. In the meantime, our autonomic nervous system notices that we are moving out of our safe zone, starts to do its job. So it releases dynorphins to counter this. And so, of course, we then in turn feel that high wearing off. So we have another drink and we get another endorphin spike followed by another large hit of dynorphin. Now, instead of just a couple, you find yourself drinking all night, chasing that initial high. And as if that's not bad enough, on top of that, over time, you need to increase how much you drink to get that same high. So, as I've mentioned in other videos about our autonomic nervous system, it does a lot of our everyday functions automatically. But apart from the essential functions that keep us alive, it also learns from and adapts to the lessons we teach it, such as alcohol makes me feel good. What do I mean by that? Well, when alcohol creates that unnatural spike in endorphins, our brain really likes the sensation. And when our brain finds something pleasurable, it releases dopamine, which is considered our feel-good drug. Except dopamine is so much more than that, as it is also involved in our learning and memory. So much so that each time dopamine is released, the association with what caused feel good is recorded in our subconscious. Now, that's fine if we have a healthy relationship with alcohol or whatever the substance of choice is, and we have many other means of pleasure that result in the release of dopamine. However, as our alcohol consumption and frequency increases, our brain eventually associates alcohol and everything to do with our alcohol consumption as the only means to accessing that feeling of pleasure. But what has this got to do with cravings, you may ask? At this stage, our brain has become so used to this habit that it now anticipates in advance the dopamine hit it is expecting as we near drink o'clock. So much so that eventually our autonomic nervous system even releases dynorphin in advance to counter the expected endorphin spike. Now we actually need that drink just to get back to baseline. Without it, we feel low, even depressed. This is where our drinking, or in the case of other substances using, becomes problematic. At this stage, we are slave to the unnatural endorphin spike and the subsequent dopamine release. As our dependency advances, our brain even stops making dopamine naturally from things that used to give us pleasure, relying instead entirely on the unnatural, much higher high it gets from artificial means. So we become less interested in life's normal pleasures, as they can't compete with endorphin spikes available from these artificial sources. This is pretty serious, as we are now on the slippery slope to depression, as well as being dependent on alcohol. Wow. So what to do? Seems like becoming dependent on alcohol, regardless of how well we seem to be functioning at work or in general, is not such a good idea. And those cravings which we give into by making excuses are far more serious than we realized. Certainly, looking at what is happening in our body, it's no wonder we find it difficult to stop. But knowing what you know now, not stopping, is no longer an option. The cost of doing nothing, the cost to your health, well-being, your relationships, family, career, etc., is far too great. Now you understand the science behind the cravings and how alcohol and other substances we use to get those unnaturally high endorphin spikes affect us over time. It would make sense to reevaluate your relationship with it. Luckily, it is not all doom and gloom, and we can recover from this dependency. We can get back to the safe zone. We can learn to receive pleasure naturally again. Will it be easy? No. But neither will the alternative of continuing down the road of dependency. Granted, there are likely many other issues to be resolved too, such as why the feeling of emptiness, despite appearing to be successful. There may be unresolved trauma, missing emotional needs, feelings of worthlessness, guilt, maybe shame. The Inner Focus to Recover program helps you to deal with all these issues. Simply book a free clarity call with me through the link below to find out more. All right, guys, I hope that gives you an insight into what's really happening when we get those cravings and really why we need to do something about it sooner rather than later. Cheers, guys. Enjoy your weekend.